right, hello everybody, and welcome. We have got ourselves a brand new episode of our Back to Basics live stream. I'm excited about this one. This is proving to be a lot of fun, although admittedly, for those of you who are watching, it's also a hell of a lot for me to juggle tech-wise, not to mention my constant, screwing up of words. And I'm saying hello to the chat as well. Today we are live, which means you get to see all of our fun little foibles and craziness firsthand, and all the stuff we don't edit out, which weirdly isn't actually that much. For any of you who are joining for the first time, strong choice, good of you. Well to join here in the middle of things. I'm glad of it. I am Pastor Don. I am the person who's doing the thing, and I am joined by our truly magnificent, absolutely wonderful, and I will sing of her praises every time we do the thing, Courtney Fraley.
Thank you. I've been telling you not to rag on why are you if you're just joining us, why are you starting here? I'm like, people get the algorithm suggests episode 36 of something to you sometimes.
I don't understand the algorithm, so I'm trying not to rag on people for that because it may seem odd to me, but it may work perfectly fine for everyone else. And the algorithm is a weird and capricious deity whom we choose not to question. So today,
unlike the creator of Heaven and Earth, who you seem to have hired me exclusively to question. I say hired. That's a strong term.
Invited.
Invited.
All right, so we are here, we are caffeinated, we are ready to do the thing. Those of you following along in the chat, as you can probably see by now, you are joining us in the episode. I've got the chat up on the screen, I've got the scripture up on the screen, I am monitoring all the things, and I just am like that meme of doing all the things from back in the ancient days of the millennial internet.
Bible.
Yeah, it's Twitch for the Bible. It's a good way of doing that. And honestly, I should probably figure out Twitch, but I'm an old man who is set in his ways. But it's on my list.
If you can figure out Final Fantasy 14, you can figure out Twitch, I'm pretty sure.
I'm pretty sure Twitch doesn't allow me to set people on fire yet, but if they add that functionality, maybe.
You gotta get to a certain subscriber level before that kicks in.
Oh, that's how that works. Okay, now I get it. All right, we'll add Twitch to our to-do list at some point. But for now, we are going to focus on the Holy Bible, which is that thing which we are talking. The Holy Bible, the Holy Bible, if one prefers.
Wow, we're starting off strong today.
That's my goal. I am running on caffeine today, which I have brought with me and will be drinking constantly throughout. So, bringing you
I've been fighting off sleep all day because I'm out of my Adderall. So, woo!
Oh, this is going to be fun. Shit, did I take my meds today? Yes, I did. Okay, good. I'm good. This is me medicated. All right. So, we are doing Mark chapter 3. For those of you playing the home game, let me see if I can drop the link in the YouTube chat. I can. Thank you, technology. So that link is provided for your pleasure. We will be reading out of the NRSVUE and not the Robert Alter translation because Robert Alter does Hebrew and this is Greek. So we are going to lean right in.
Sorry, what was that?
What?
What did you say?
I said we are going to be working out of the NRSVUE and not the Alter translation.
And not the Alter version because what?
Because Alter is Hebrew and the New Testament's in Greek.
Valid.
So instead, for those of you who are really interested, I am instead working out of the commentary innovatively titled Mark by the Reverend Dr. C. Clifton Black. Who, in addition to being one of the foremost Markan scholars out there, is also a former professor of mine at Princeton and has, on occasion, walked us through how and why he did the things. So it is a fantastic commentary. I've got it on Kindle myself, but you want to get a copy of that one?
I was going to say, your commentary shelf must be ridiculous at this point, but it's on a Kindle.
To be perfectly honest, it's not as ridiculous as it ought to be, because most of my commentaries are either secondhand, other than the handful of ones that I've sought out or bought myself, which is basically just the Alter translation and this Mark commentary, and a commentary on Daniel as well by Dr. Chunleong Xiao, who is also freaking fantastic. But we'll save that for when we inevitably get to Daniel. For today, we have Marky Mark to work on. And would you like to be our reader for today, dear
Marky
Courtney?
Mark. Yeah, sure. I'll read. Alrighty. Are we gonna do this like story by story?
Well, how do you want to do it?
Because
Do we want to go?
for those of you who are new to Mark just shoves like it just moves it up. Dare I make an anime comparison? Like you might be accustomed to the Bible moving more at a classic Trigun pace, and Mark just picks up full Trigun Stampede, and it's just here's 50 things happening in a paragraph.
Yep,
Alrighty,
that's pretty much it. So to give you an idea, like if you haven't caught the last two episodes, no infancy narrative, right into the crux of things, and just everything is happening all at once. We're already into the ministry of Jesus. There was no kind of preteen Jesus, no scene at the manger, the escape into Egypt really wasn't a thing. We're pretty much just right into it from jump. So there was Jesus. He was born. Shit happened. Deal with it. Next.
Alrighty then. So let's get to it.
So are we going section by section or doing the whole chunk?
Let's do story by story.
Okay,
I feel like
that's
gonna make it easier to digest, you know?
All right. So,
Alrighty. This one is titled The Man with a Withered Hand. Again he entered the synagogue, and a man was there who had a withered hand. They were watching him to see whether he would cure him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man who had the withered hand, "Come forward." Then he said to them, "Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or kill?" But they were silent. He looked around at them with anger. He was grieved at their hardness of heart and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately conspired with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him.
right.
Okay, so this is 6 verses of, the whole, setting you up with a weird straw man, or like putting together some reducto ad absurdum to take apart your entire concept is something people have been doing for a very long time.
Right. It's also like for eagle-eyed viewers of today's program will note that our episode today is entitled Epic Foreshadowing, a title that I concocted based specifically on this pericope, this chunk of the passage.
Even just verse 6.
Yeah, well, verse 6 is kind of the primary foreshadowing bit, but like the whole thing is a setup to multiple things, but the most obvious one is
the crucifixion.
yes. Like this is Marking speed for you. We're at the beginning of chapter 3, and they're already saying, "Hey, this is what they're going to kill him for." Like we're
working on the Sabbath.
Yeah, exactly, and it sets up the debate over the Sabbath in beautifully clear terms. Like there's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. This is what they are going to kill him for, but also like they've laid out the whole terms of the debate right here. Jesus' words, "Is it lawful to do good or do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to kill?" He's framing the whole argument about what the Sabbath even means in that phrase.
Yeah.
And in true, perfect MAGA way, their response is, "Oh, I'm not going to say a damn thing.
We're going to hang you by whatever you do."
Yeah. And like...
Either...
No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, we've done Genesis, and far be it for me to claim that I know God or in that way or anything, but I had kind of gotten the impression that the point of the Sabbath was like peace, rest, restoration, and communion with the Lord. Is that about right?
I'm pretty sure I did a sermon on this one recently, although it may have been one of my grad school ones that didn't go out to the community. I'm pretty sure I did a sermon on this, though. But the whole debate over the Sabbath that Jesus regularly gets into, is the Sabbath made for man or is man made for the Sabbath? These arguments that come back again and again and again. Like, what the hell is the point of the Sabbath if other people can't take it? And this dates back. Yeah, I did preach this sermon for our community. So if you go back into our archives, you'll probably find it in one of our worship services. I've been terrible about uploading sermons separately, so I apologize. But the argument basically goes is, what the hell is the point of having a Sabbath if you need people to not rest in order for you to feel good about resting? I put this back when I did the sermon on this. I put this in the context of me walking through a Sunday afternoon brunch that my parents were holding at their house, and watching the male elders go, "This is the life. This is what the Sabbath is supposed to be." But as a kid, having got there by way of the kitchen, where my mom and a couple of her friends were working their asses off, I'm like, "The hell are you talking about? The Sabbath?"
Yeah.
So you got the guy with the withered hand here, and how can he rest? Like,
Christians keep the Sabbath in really weird ways. This is one of the million times a year that I'm like, we really need to get like a Jewish theologian on here who can be like, actually,
I'm I'm not going to actually Jewish theology here, because obviously white guy pastor, probably a bad move, but it is worth noting that even Jewish theology historically has had ups and downs with this. Otherwise, Jesus wouldn't have anybody to argue this piece with. So like they've had similar weirdness in their history as well.
Four people in a room, six opinions. Yeah, no,
yeah,
I know.
yeah. But I will say, the weirdness that he's arguing against particularly here is, I wouldn't say inherently Jewish. I say it's legalist, which we have as much in Christianity as anywhere else. And the legalism, what would become eventually, what is at that time the Shammai school. And again, Jesus, Pharisee, probably from the Hillel school, versus other Pharisees from other schools. Not like Jesus is an independent guy who's Christian from jump, like that piece aside.
Who's draw a curtain over that entire discussion?
There's so many sub pieces to these discussions of Jesus interacting with the Jewish community here that we could and should do entire separate videos on. My point being, the Shammai school that he's arguing against, these are the legalists, the ones who would become like the far right Hasidic types today. And even that's a simplification, because the charting of Jewish movements to the diaspora is not something I should do, but also something I'm not an expert in, but also something that's not relevant, but it at least paints the picture for you to know what I'm talking about anyway. It is, as Douglas Adams would say, an analogy that is entirely, completely wrong, but nonetheless gives you the idea. I forget what the exact quote was, because caffeine and tired. Anyway, my point being, which I've gotten to it by the long road, is that we're talking about, or he's in communication with people who are arguing that the Sabbath is a law that must be observed meticulously, otherwise you're going to hell, for lack of a better term. You must do it exactly right and exactly in this way, or thou shalt be doomed. And Jesus' counter argument here is, so you're telling me we can't help other people when God's all about that shit? Like, what? The hell are you on?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he does the thing, and sets the stage for everything that's going to come. And this discussion will be revisited later in the text, but in the end, his big old flipping the bird to the Shammai school folk and saying, "Kill me if you must," but this guy needs a Sabbath too. That's important.
Yeah.
So, you got me ranting. Do you have any more snark to throw at it?
No, we better go on to the next bit.
We do got lots of bits. If anyone out there in chat land wants to throw questions out there, by the way, I'll circle back to them if I see them. So, moving on to a multitude at the seaside.
All right. Jesus departed with his disciples to the sea, and a great multitude from Galilee followed him. Hearing all that he was doing, they came to him in great numbers from Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, beyond the Jordan, and the region around Tyre and Sidon. He told his disciples to have a boat ready for him because of the crowds, so that they would not crush him, for he had cured many, so that all who had diseases pressed upon him to touch him. Whenever the unclean spirits saw him, they fell down before him and shouted, "You are the Son of God!" But he sternly ordered them not to make him known. This is an interesting tidbit. Like, I mean, I guess there's the traditional superhero answer, but why did Jesus not want it to be known that he was the Son of God?
All right, this is a thing, and it is one of those things that we don't talk about as much as we ought to, and it is what we call in big capital letters the Messianic secret. For most of Jesus's ministry, he not only did not declare himself the Messiah or the Son of God, but actively opposed anyone on his side who was trying to make it known. For example, there's a quote you may be familiar with that comes directly from the mouth of Jesus, where he rounds on somebody and says, "Get behind me, Satan," which is the only time that Jesus straight up refers to somebody as Satan. Do you remember who he was talking to at that time? No?
Not offhand, no.
He was talking to Peter, who you may remember as the first fucking pope. And the reason he was saying that to Peter is because Peter said, "Surely not, Lord. You should tell everybody you're the Messiah." Jesus was fucking serious about this. He did not want people to know it.
Why?
And
there's got to be a reason.
There is.
Do we know it?
We do. And that has to do with that great and terrible word that evangelicals hate and the rest of us love, called context. You see, the word Messiah...
Let's get into it. Let's get into it. We can't make a full sermon on each one of these stories.
I know. I'll keep it short, but I do love to play with people and say, hey, you'll never guess what comes next. No. The word Messiah meant something in those days. It wasn't just a throwaway word. Meshiach, the anointed one. It was a specific thing that they were, and many still are, expecting to come. Jesus knew who he was. He understood himself as the Messiah. He was the Son of God. But he also knew fully well that there was a very large difference between who he was and who they were expecting. The Messiah, as expected, was
Are you telling me that in a strange roundabout way, Christ himself understood why I'm hesitant to call myself Christian to new people?
In many respects, yes. I think Christ would be the first to understand that. In this context, he knew what was expected was the warrior king. The Messiah they were expecting was someone who would come like David of old, flaming swords in hand, and make Jerusalem great again. That literally, that really was what they were looking for. MAGA overtones intentional. Like, this is the intentionality behind it. They're looking for the Messiah to kick the Romans to the curb, burn them to the ground, and conquer the world in the name of the almighty YHVH. Like, that's what they were looking for. And so the Messiah coming as a peacemaker, as an itinerant preacher, as somebody who had all the miraculous power of God, but was there sacrificially and not destructively or vengefully or powerfully. There were a lot of false messiahs that had come over the years, and there'd be a few more to come after Jesus as well, who all tried and all failed, and it wasn't pretty. They would either try to fight the Romans and get killed, or they would not be good enough for the people, and the people would kill them. So the end of the path for the Messiah was, I'm the Messiah. Great, you're fucking dead. No matter which way you went, that was the end of that road pretty immediately. And Jesus is of course blessed with the foreknowledge of his ministry, what it has to do.
I mean, in fairness, he did still absolutely die.
Right. That is the thing that he did. But time and place matter. Like, if Jesus had been killed 35 seconds into his ministry, if he got up and said, all right, this is what it says in the book of Isaiah. Also, I'm the Son of God. Peace out, y'all. He'd have been dead before he got out of Galilee. So, like, Jesus knows this has to go in a certain way. The timing has to be operative in such that the conflicts that happen have to happen in the right order. He knows what's coming, and he's like, okay, yeah, I may be, but if you say it now, none of this shit's going to work. Shut up. And so this is going to happen again and again and again and again throughout the text. And that's really what it is. It's the Messianic secret. It's Jesus going, shut up! Beyond that, I do want to draw attention to the rest of this passage, because this is something that Jesus does a lot, but we never ever talk about. This is Jesus got overloaded by the crowd and fucked off as quickly as he could. Like, we have this mental image of Jesus as this kindly, loving person surrounded by the crowds who never got sick of them, loved to handshake and friendly and interact and, you know, yada, yada, yada. This was a man who loved to press the flesh and he'd politic his way through. Fuck no, this man got overloaded by crowds constantly. Like, given how short Mark is, how much it doesn't have that is present in the other Gospels, pay attention as we go through to see even still how many times we get, and Jesus said, fuck this noise, and left for the nearest mountain and or ocean.
Let's get in a boat. They can't follow us too closely in a boat.
Right! Like,
it's way too peoply on this beach.
Yeah, there are too many people, and I'm done with people now. Like, so, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't
even Christ got overstimulated. I'm gonna remember that the next time I'm like, why will my child not stop making sounds?
We have in the chat the question, autistic Jesus confirmed? I won't say necessarily yes or no, but I will say that not wanting to fucking deal with crowds is a perfectly legitimate situation, neurotypical or neurodivergent. No matter where you are, it is holding to want to see a bunch of people and say, okay, I'm done with people now. That's it. We are done with people. People are over. Which admittedly God has done before, although this time it's more, I'm going to step away unless I'm going to drown everybody. So we'll take it. All right.
Yeah. It's been too peoply down here a few times.
Yeah.
All right.
So we can say from this passage that with respect to being overwhelmed by people and needing water as a solution, God has definitely improved the divine methodology a bit.
Alrighty. So, here we go. Jesus appoints the 12. We ready to move on?
Before you dive into that, I'm going to point out, because y'all can see this on screen, the appointment of the 12 is 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 7 verses, that's it, and we move on. Like, look at how quick this shit happens. Just like, don't forget about this. This is fast.
Was Mark just aware that, like, you know, other scribes had written down, like, the other stuff, and, like, he was going to focus on this bit?
Actually, it's the opposite. Mark is the earliest known gospel, as we mentioned back in the first episode.
Sorry, I've got a brain like a sieve.
Yeah, so, me too. Be amazed how many times I had to repeat this shit before it finally stuck in my studies. Now, Mark is the oldest of the Gospels. So what we're getting here is not someone who's omitted shit that's present in the other stuff. His is the oldest known record we have, so this is the core. Like, everything else is other communities that have added to it using sources we don't have access to because ancient.
Yeah.
But Mark's recollection is specifically to go back to 1950s TV references. It's just the facts. Like, it's just this. Basic context, basic facts, rapid fire. Only the shit that was important and verifiable. Which becomes a really big discussion when we get to the end and realize there's no resurrection narrative in the original text. So, like, yeah, is there seriously? Yeah, there are, like, the oldest text, Mark, does raise us a lot of questions. And then we can get from there into the discussions of, like, source documentary hypothesis. Is there a Q document? Is there not a Q document? Like, that's a lot of other stuff.
Q document.
Again, I think it's worth noting that the discussion of Q as a biblical source author predates both the MAGA conspiracy and the Star Trek character by a lot of years. So the OG Q is actually the document writer of a theoretical source document that all 4 Gospels draw from. That is one of the theories as to why all the Gospels are pretty similar. The other being that Mark is the oldest, so they all looked to Mark and then took his shit and then added their own, which I think is a little more historically likely.
That does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. But again, like, theologians have had different perspectives over the years. Academic science can only prove so much. My personal opinion as someone who studied this shit is that Markan source theology makes more sense. But we're never really going to know. But yeah, in the end, so that's what we're dealing with here, our aside notwithstanding. We're dealing with the core of the story, the basics, just the OG information. So that's why I like to start with Mark, because this is a good insight into what the oldest records we have thought were important. And what it thought wasn't important. Like the shit that doesn't show up, like the infancy narrative. Why is that not in there? Well, we don't have an actual answer, but that does tell us that, wow, the OG church didn't necessarily think this was the most important part to include.
It's so funny, the two highest holidays on the Christian calendar are effectively not accounted for in Mark. Christmas, the birth, and Easter, the resurrection.
Right.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Although it is worth noting, Good Friday is definitely in the book of Mark. So we do get that very strongly. However, we'll get to
some of this stuff, as much as people will be like, Jesus wasn't even real, like, no, the crucifixion of Jesus is like a verifiable historical fact.
Yeah, it's a matter of
things
historical
this
record.
far back anyway.
Yeah. I've actually watched, because I am like terminally on Reddit, even though I don't post a whole hell of a lot there. I have watched a number of discussions about the historicity of Jesus, and the atheists insisting that Jesus wasn't real and never existed. Like, every time they bring up a reference, like, well, you can't count the Bible because that's Christian and therefore biased. Okay, but it's still archaeological record that, take away influences. Like, the core facts of it are still historical. But fine, right out the Bible. We've got Josephus. We've got Roman recordology. We've got a bunch of other stuff. And every time that conversation comes up, you see these atheist theobros, if you will, for lack of a better term, who are just like, well, you can't count Josephus because...
Theobros is amazing.
Yeah. Well, you can't count Josephus because he was also Christian adjacent. You can't count the Roman records because this was post-Constantine and they had a Christian bias as well. It's like, okay, yeah, but, like, any record keeping from that region is going to have some kind of pseudo-Christian bias to it that doesn't make it inaccurate. Like, we still know that Nasser was a dick when it came to copper, even though his archaeological records have passed through Christian hands between here and then.
You can't be making Nasser reference to me. You can't do that to me. I'm sorry. It's like history's greatest meme.
Yes. I love it.
It's such a core piece of the human okay, if anybody in the chat or watching this later on doesn't get it, since Don goes on tangents all the time.
Oh, yes.
I will go ahead and go on the tangent. Nasser, was that the merchant or was that the customer?
Nasser was the copper vendor. We don't know who the person who bought it was.
Yeah, one of the oldest pieces of human writing that we have is a customer complaint. And it's so relatable about, he sold me the wrong grade of copper. This is inferior and it must be, it must be dealt with. And just, it's really, really freaking funny. Like that if you look, I know if you go in historical museums, other things that they'll have the bits and pieces of too, it's receipts. It's all receipts. And this is a complaint.
Yep. And it dates back to 1750 BCE, by the way. So that's almost 2,000 years before Jesus.
Yeah, so we got, not quite 4,000 years ago, we're looking at this reference from, like, early cradle of civilization business, and and the fact that we're, like, still making inferior grade copper jokes in 2024 AD. Get out of there with the CE stuff. That doesn't roll off the tongue the right way. Let's just go with it.
Yeah, it's from... It's written in, it's from the Sumerian city of Ur. So old that we hadn't quite discovered polysyllabic city names yet. Like,
and we talk about the Ur example of something, and that's where we get that word from, isn't it?
What?
Because isn't that where we get the term, like, the Ur example of something?
Yeah,
like
that's not a common use phrase, but yeah, that's where we get it from. Like, and it's like, to give you an idea, it was written in the language it was written in was Akkadian cuneiform, which dates back to.
Is that how it's? I always assumed it was cuneiform.
Yeah, well, specifically
Cuneiform makes more
Akkadian
sense.
cuneiform, which predates Sumeria and goes all the way back to the city-state of Akkad, which is one of the oldest known human city-states.
It's clever too. Like if you look at it, you can see. Oh, they had like a little, they had like a little rectangular thing, and they just press it in at the different angles to quick. Like
Yeah.
you can see how you could write quickly that way. Humans are clever. Okay, sorry, I'm getting way too into like ancient human history, and yeah, we got it. Okay, Jesus appoints the 12.
Yeah, let's actually read the verse we're talking about.
Can I also mention while we're doing this, I am like strangely weirded out by the fact that the Bible Gateway of this, I don't know if the paper version is like this, it doesn't capitalize he and him. It doesn't capitalize Jesus's pronouns.
Because that's not common. Like,
There's some of them where it gets into like in the first one, you know the context, so it helps, but there's a couple of sentences where it's like, whoa, dude, pronoun game, who is which he?
And
like,
that's
and
why,
it
like,
helps
we're
to have
reading
special pronouns for Jesus.
Yeah, and
Hey,
that's why they
we've
don't
had
do that.
special pronouns all along.
That's why we don't do that in like the NRSVUE and the ones that actually mean to be accurate, is because like you can't totally be sure with Greek necessarily who the pronouns are referring to in a lot of cases, and so the addition of a capital H for Jesus is in many cases an assumption, and if you're trying to be academically rigorous, you don't make assumptions. And what's more, as we just discussed with the Messianic secret, Jesus wasn't real big on being singled out like that, bitches. Like, so don't do that. Like, Jesus's pronouns were he, him in the traditional sense, if we put it in English terms. Capitals not required. And of course, that gets us into the whole Jesus is trans argument and discussion, which is going to be a whole nother aside, which I think we do want to get to the text today.
People not on the Discord are hearing you say Jesus is trans and going, what the fuck?
Yep.
He's got a good point, guys. I gave him hell the first time he said it too. It's like, really, dude? What are you trying to fucking do? And he's like, no, I'm serious, and laid out the argument, and I was like, son of a bitch.
Yeah, it actually works.
It's pretty valid.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So if you want to know that story, join the Discord server. I'm not going to get into it here,
but anyway, about that, let's
disciples.
go ahead. Actually, do this. All right. Sorry. Go ahead. Going ahead. Yeah, we can't be trusted not to ramble. You'd think adding a third would help. It does not. He went up the mountain and called to him those whom he wanted, and they came to him. And he appointed 12 to be with him and to be sent out to preach and to have authority to cast out demons. So he appointed the 12. Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, James, son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James, to whom he gave the name Boanerges, that is, sons of thunder, and Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew and Matthew and Thomas and James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus and Simon the Cananaean, and Judas Iscariot, who handed him over. Okay, this is the best name passage that I've run across. I was raised in the freaking church. How have I never heard? I'm sure Boanerges is incorrect, but it is the easiest version of that to say. How do I say that?
Do you want to know why we never used the Markan passage in my high school Sunday school class? Because the one time we did, everybody in the room started referring to James as boner energy.
How do you actually pronounce that?
That should be Boanerges, probably.
Boanerges?
Yeah, Boanerges would be the something along those lines. Yeah. Yeah, and that's. I'm going to take this line right out of the commentary. One cannot convert this term's consonants and vowels into any Semitic construction. Like, it just simply isn't. So I actually want to look. I'm going to take a minute here and look up what that is in the Greek. That's what verse is that? That's 18.
So Jesus could just pass out the ability to cast out demons. And again, what are we talking about with casting out demons here? Given that there's no hell and the devil is a construct and all the other fun little things that we like to get on about.
So, first off, for Boner Energy here, they're referring to that as a nickname. Strong's thinks it's Chaldee origin. But nobody really seems to know where the hell that one came from. They assume it means passionate or with fiery zeal. Son of Thunder is kind of a cool way of spinning that into English, but we don't fucking know. Boner Energy, that is Proto-Billy Graham, would work just as well. Like a guy who was all fired up for shit. So anyway, demons. You want to know about demons. So where was that?
Talking about casting out demons. verse 15, and to have authority to cast out demons. It's its own entire verse.
Okay, there's a lot to be said about what the hell casting out demons means. And I
got time.
I have several different things I view this on. Like,
are we getting into where there is a great deal of theological debate?
There is a great deal of theological debate, linguistic debate, archaeological debate, context debate. There's a lot of debate over what the fuck this is about. And the end result is, well, we don't know, because our society has evolved so far from this kind of cognitive construction that it's effectively alien to us. Now, it should go without saying that at the time, a lot of what was written off as demonic possession or what have you, or just dismissed as demons, were non-neurotypical behaviors and or mental illness. So that is definitely a piece of what's going on here.
Seizures, I would imagine, also probably got that treatment.
Yeah, seizures. Someone gets a brain tumor and starts acting crazy and, unstable. Someone falls down, gets a thwack on the head, and suddenly starts speaking in modern-day French for some reason, which is a thing that can actually happen. All of these things would be dismissed as demons. So that is a part of what we have when we talk about casting out demons. That is a piece of it. And we can broadly choose to group that together with the other miraculous healings we talk about if we so choose. So if someone does have an actual mental illness that can be quote unquote cured, that the casting out of demons would be like a healing act, like healing a withered hand. Which, by the way,
I'm curious about the finer points of that too. I mean, you're getting to my most middle school atheist prove it sort of, but it's in there.
To my response is going to be no, because we can't. I'm drawing certain assumptions that the mental health aspect of the casting out of demons, if we're dealing with miraculous healings, and if we're taking miraculous healings as a thing that happened, that the casting out of demons in that category would be the healing of those mental illnesses that are actually the result of damage or deformity that can be healed, not just being neuroatypical or neurodivergent or what have you. That would be just a normal thing that wouldn't have any effect. But if someone has an aneurysm and starts having seizures and the Lord says, I cast out the demon, and they're fine, it's a healing act. Okay, that's pretty much probably all that was. But there's multiple other things that are under this umbrella as well of what
I don't know. I wouldn't mind Jesus reaching out and resetting the reward centers in my brain so that they work properly.
Right, which honestly might be part of what this means. That might
something the peace of God which surpasses all understanding.
Yeah, that could very well be a part of what this means. The second piece to that then, of course, is the much larger, more mystical aspect of things, in which we have to admit there is a whole chunk of spirituality which our rational modern era stuff hasn't really explored. And I've talked about this in previous episodes before, the idea of the spiritually ephemeral. We've pretty much since the I'm blanking on the word here, but since we crawled out of the Dark Ages, we've been focusing on scientific methodology, intellectualism, and the development of provable cognitive frameworks in which to understand the physical world. And
the Enlightenment.
Yeah, that's the. I don't know why the hell I was forgetting that word. Yes, post-Enlightenment.
I took like 4 credits of college history.
Ha. No, but
It was at least
post-Enlightenment.
6.
Post-Enlightenment, we've been focused on quantifying the physical world, and we've built up a construct whereby if we can't quantify it as part of the physical world, then it doesn't exist. Prior to that time, there was a belief that the ephemeral and the spiritual were their own equally viable discipline, which we kind of chucked out as we went through the Enlightenment.
Something Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah, and I'm not going to go so far as to say, like, haha, magic is real, you can cast spells. No, that's not what I'm talking about. But there is a dimension to human existence that is inexplicable according to science. Like, we're not these fragile shells. We are high voltage electricity running through a meat mech.
A little less poetic than Yoda, but
yeah,
still, I'll accept it.
I've been described as worse. I'll take it. But my point is, like, our actual self, what the soul constitutes, what the mind constitutes, we have never been able to define, and it acts and interacts with levels of reality that we don't understand. Like small force electrical interactions. Well, if we're electricity and we don't understand how electricity interacts with shit on the subatomic level, then we don't understand how we interact with shit. And so there is, even if we put it in hardcore physical terms, there's a whole aspect of reality that we haven't explored because we dismissed it as silly because it's not part of the physical realm. And so when
it's something we've contemplated as a species through like literature and science. I mean, what else is the story of Frankenstein? Yeah. Absolute masterpiece that it is. If it isn't wondering, can you put the parts of a person back together, give it the right spark, and would there be a person in there?
Yeah.
Like,
to put
this is big question shit we've been asking ourselves as a species forever. Yeah. So I don't expect to just have answers to it. But yeah, we're not saying that magic, that like Don said, that you can cast spells. We're saying that there is more to the world than what we understand at any given time.
Yeah, as the extremely wise and well-known theologian Wesley once said, it appears that space and time and thought aren't the separate things we thought they were. And by the way, for those of you who are wondering, I was not referring to John Wesley. I was referring to Wesley Crusher. Ha! Star Trek joke.
Yeah, I knew it. Yeah, no.
You had to know that was coming.
I've been slipping him in, not getting credit. I've made like 15 references in this episode, and I've only explained like half of them.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I'm noticing, because the chat's on a bit of a lag to where we are when we're actually speaking right now, so we see it about 30 seconds after. They did appreciate your Full Metal Alchemist references. So the chat quite enjoyed those. So thank you, chat. We appreciate it when you catch our references.
Yes, thank you.
Not that I'm going to stop if you don't catch them, because I am a freaking menace, but it is what it is. So yeah, the short of it is, when it comes to demons and shit, I tend to throw out "I don't know" as an answer. I had this conversation with several colleagues in my denomination actually yesterday about, like, well, we don't like to talk about evil spirits threatening you and making your life complicated and shit, because we don't believe in demons in that way. But there are, for lack of a better term, narrative forces in our own life that provide pushback when we try to do shit. Like,
narrative forces?
I use that term because, like, we experience life narratively, so it's a helpful...
I would argue, okay, you and I just disagree on something here. I would argue that it's actually really not healthy for us to view our life as a narrative, because we are living free will, and so is everyone else around us, and we're bumping into one another's goals and dreams and fears and realities in so many different ways. What?
I agree. I'm not going to argue with you on that. I agree with you 100%. As a mental framework for our holistic interaction with life, you're right. Absolutely.
Yeah, you are not the main character, and neither is anyone else.
Right. But it's also worth understanding that our kind of default beginning place all the time is to start from what I see, what I feel, and what I experience.
Oh yeah, you can't do anything else as an individual.
Right.
We're
So
getting into like
any case,
full on Evangelion like navel gazing here.
Yeah. In any case, when we look at life in a narrative context, I'm not saying that we should disregard other people. I'm never saying that. I'm not so narcissistic as to make that claim at all. What I'm saying is that at that base level, when we try to introduce good into the world, when we try to do something, the world pushes back. And it's not necessarily just we do good things and other people push back. Like, there are inexplicable forces that cause shit to go wrong that we can't possibly understand. Types of causality that make no sense to us, or just the narrative flow of everybody's stories working together, creating some sort of vast spiritual network that makes no sense to us. There are just some days where you introduce shit into the world and life smacks you back like a bitch. Like, it happens. And we don't understand why. We don't understand how that works. We're like, what the fuck is this shit? And you can call it demons. You can call it a spiritual assault from the devil. You can call it whatever the hell you want. It is still a thing that's there. But finding the right and healthy terms to discuss it is important. Anyway. Do you want to move on? Or do we have more about the 12?
That's a fantastic segue into Time for Demons.
Yay, demons! Side note, for the record, I've brought this up again and again because I am currently in the doctoral program, getting my doctorate degree. One of the things I most love is that in every field of study, there is a PhD and then there is a terminal doctorate degree that is specific to the field. I am, of course, not going for a PhD. I'm going for the terminal doctorate in my specific field, which is theology and the science of preaching. And so, like, for example, you can get a PhD in medicine, or you can get a medical doctorate, which is an MD. You can get a PhD in constitutional law, or you can get a JD, a Juris Doctorate, which allows you to go and be a lawyer. Like, each field has a PhD in the academic study, and then they have a terminal degree in that study. And in Christian ministry, you have a PhD in whatever category of ministry, or you have a doctorate in ministry, also known as a D-Min. So I just absolutely love the fact that the terminal degree in our field is D-Min. I'm getting me a demon. Anyway.
That's absurd.
I love it.
There, the things... When life seems to make wordplay at you.
Yeah.
Forces we don't understand. Alrighty. Okay, here we go. Jesus and Beelzebul. Then he went home, and the crowd came together again so that they could not even eat. When his family heard it, they went out to restrain him, for people were saying, he has gone out of his mind. And the scribes... Hang on, wait. This feels like it's missing a verse or something. Let me try this from the top. Then he went home, and the crowd came together again, so that they could not even eat. When his family heard it, they went out to restrain him. Again, pronoun game. For people were saying, he has gone out of his mind. And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem said, he has Beelzebul, and by the ruler of the demons he casts out demons. And he called to them and spoke to them in parables. How can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand. But his end has come. But no one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his property without first tying up the strong man. Then indeed the house can be plundered. Truly, I tell you, people will be forgiven for their sins, and whatever blasphemies they utter. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit can never have forgiveness, but is guilty of an eternal sin. For they had said he has an unclean spirit. Okay.
It's that one, y'all!
Okay. So, interestingly enough, going into this one, again, it's not saying that, like, it gives, names of demons and what have you. But there's not actually one in the scene. It's just that they're like, oh my gosh,
They're naming
Jesus is
something
going
from
crazy.
contextual folklore, okay? They're not like saying, this is the actual demon Beelzebub who lives in Satan with all of his minions and will be called forth in the last days to, I don't know, poke fat children with a pitchfork? What the fuck? I don't know.
Yeah, like if somebody says something really fucking dark and you turn to him and you go, okay, Satan, that doesn't necessarily mean you believe that there's a literal Satan.
Yeah.
This has been true through much of human history.
Right. Like, so that piece is there right off the bat. And one of the things I love about this is the efficiency of this passage, by the way, is then he went home. Jesus went home. The crowds followed him, and he couldn't even eat. Like, they were bugging him and his family. His family heard it, and they went to hold him back. And my God, fucking family dynamics here, right? Like,
I was like, what is happening?
like Mary and presumably Joseph, if he's not dead yet, his various brothers and sisters, come rocking out, be like, clearly Jesus must be off his fucking mind to have gathered this kind of crowd. Bring him inside. He's got the spirit of Satan or something in him. Bring him the hell inside. Something's wrong with the Jesus. And of course, the speed at
Josh, you okay?
yeah, pretty much. Like, and the speed with which they move to do this does suggest to us that this is not necessarily a new experience for them. Of Jesus walking out of the house and coming back, followed by a crowd because he said some shit. Like, so this is not necessarily a new experience for them, but this is indicative of a critical point in the life of Jesus, because like if he did this as a teenager and a couple of people from the local store and whatnot are like, this kid's off his fucking nut, Mary, get it together. That's different from where we're at now, where he's got like scribes who have come down from Jerusalem from the temple who are like, okay, this kid's fucking demonic.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be like if your kid walked out and came home and several doctors followed him back and saying, something's wrong with this kid. Like, so Mary and the fam, their reaction is,
go out, you come back with half the town following you.
Yeah, saying that you're completely...
Mary's just done with it.
Yeah, like, I mean, can you imagine how exhausting it must be to be the mother of Christ? Oh, my Lord. Literally. So, like, that being understood, and the efficiency with which it moves through Jesus' family relationship, the efficiency with which it sets up that he's at a critical point now where he can't really stay at home anymore. Like, he has to go out. Like, say what you will about Mark being bare bones. It's extremely efficient with the way it sets shit up. Like, there is not a wasted letter in this passage. Like, it sets the scene so perfectly, so efficiently. You can grasp the context immediately by like, okay, yeah, I get it. Clearly he wouldn't stick around after this shit. He's got to move out now. He's got to grow his ministry. Otherwise he's going to kill his family with this.
Yeah.
Like, all of that context is just immediate from that. So this is one of the reasons, by the way, why Mark is my favorite of the Gospels. The narrative efficiency of it, the clarity of the picture that it paints with the way it lays things out. I absolutely love it. We get to the argument over Beelzebul here and their claim of Jesus being a blaspheming demon. What is your take on part 2 of this one?
I just think, again, it's just leveling crazy ass accusations because you can't believe that he is who people are whispering that he might be, you know? Like, since he wasn't exactly trying to, like, did they know? I mean, clearly not properly, but like, did they have an inkling of what Jesus was? Like, the people who were out to get him, or was it just that he was too much of a shit stirrer?
Unlikely. Like, the Shammai Pharisees, like a lot of people I've encountered in my own ministry, honestly, saw the disturbance that came with him, and they recognized that, I mean, again, Jesus was a Pharisee in his own right. Like, he was a rabbi from a different school, but a rabbi nonetheless. And there is, as I have read and understood at least, because again, not a Jewish scholarship, or not a Jewish scholar myself, there were inter-school conflicts at play here too. Like House Shammai and House Hillel were not on the best of terms. So they're seeing it'd be like taking a open and affirming RCA pastor like me and putting them in a room with an evangelical who's trying to burn the gays at the stake. Like maybe not quite that dramatic, but you could make an argument that they're both from the same religion, although I would argue that the evangelical probably isn't. Okay, so probably more like someone from the PCA who's arguing that the gays should be, burned or ejected from church or whatever.
PCA, what's that?
Presbyterian Church of America. It's one of the unaffirming hyper-conservative reform denominations. So yeah, as an example. So like put the two of us in a room. We're from the same religion, but from vastly different sides of it.
Yeah. And both of you is going to think that the other one is up to some like blasphemous shit.
Exactly. So that dynamic is at play there too. So we've got all of that going on, but now we get into this last argument of how does this Beelzebul shit work, and then the bomb that Jesus drops in 28, 29, and 30. Truly, I tell you, people will be forgiven for their sins and whatever blasphemies they utter, but whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit can never have forgiveness, but is guilty of an eternal sin.
I'm not sure that's always bothered me, the idea of an eternal sin, something you could never repent from.
Which, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, tells me how closely you listen to my sermons, so thanks, because I preached on this one like a couple months back.
Hey!
I'm kidding. No, but like, I did actually do a sermon on this one, and it's an important one because what Jesus is doing here is a fucking rhetorical argument. Like, this isn't just... People love to use 28 through 30 out of context, devoid of anything else, to say, blasphemy against the Holy Spirit is an unforgivable sin, so if you do anything that I say is blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, you're going to hell. Like,
this is that taking the Lord's name in vain business again.
Kinda. But, like, the argument that Jesus is building up here in kind of the first chunk here, 20 through 27, is basically, all right, you're calling me Beelzebub. Beelzebul, or however you want to call it. You're calling me the king of the demons. I am doing God's work, speaking up for other people. I'm standing up for the oppressed. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Am actually Messiah, but not going to say it. All of the things that I'm doing are miraculous and extensions of the Holy Spirit. So basically, you're looking at God and saying, that's Satan, or that's evil, or that's demonic. So look at where you've locked yourself. You have identified the godly as ungodly. So you'll never be able to get forgiveness because you can't see God. You can't connect to God. You have cut yourself off from the divine. To paraphrase great theologian Obi-Wan Kenobi, you have done that yourself. You weren't expecting Star Wars, but it happened anyway. But no, that's really what he's doing. He's saying that your religious arguments, your religious argumentativeness, your desire for power and control and to vilify those who oppose you have bent so far back on yourself that you have cut yourself off from God. You're putting yourself in a position that you can't get out of. There's no way out of this hole you've dug yourself in unless you turn back to God, and like you're priming yourself and setting yourself up to be unable to do that. Like it's it's like chucking yourself off a building and then hoping you're going to be able to fly. Like, it's a nice hope to have, but there's only one way that's going to end. So when we talk about blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, that's what this means. It's creating these massive religious constructs that block us off from God by declaring the holy things unholy, by declaring the Holy One unholy, by denying the image of God in other people.
Jesus' least favorite thing, repeatedly demonstrated in the Bible.
Yes.
Getting your ambition in between people and God.
Yeah. Because forgiveness of any sin requires an open heart and a willingness to repent. And what the Shammai
doesn't just mean being super sorry. It means changing your ways.
Yeah. As I often tell my children, simply saying I'm sorry is not good enough. Like, you have to have a repentant heart, realize what you did is wrong, and then try to change. Like, there's a whole process to forgiveness. And what they're doing is digging themselves into an entrenched position by which they will never be able to recognize that they've done wrong. They will never be able to recognize themselves as anything other than just and righteous and perfect and holy and true, even while they're actively trying to murder people. And once you've got yourself in that position, you've put up a block to forgiveness that you can't reach, because you'll never be able to turn around. Oh dear.
Will he re-enter?
Okay, we're back.
Ah! Yay!
We're back.
Yay! I was like, I don't know what to do now.
We have resumed.
We are live.
Good. Apologies for that. Internet interruptions do still happen here from time to time. I was basically just kind of summarizing and saying that they've created a situation where they can't dig themselves out. It's it's a hole that you've dug yourself into. You've made yourself utterly convinced that you are righteous and pure and godly and holy, and you can never say, I'm sorry.
You set yourself up to a position where you completely resist all self-analysis to a religious degree.
Yeah.
So there's no way for you to find your sins, to repent for them. Yeah.
Right. There was an article not too long ago about how there was a spate of evangelical preachers who were trying to preach from the Sermon on the Mount and getting pushback from their congregations, who were like, what is this woke nonsense you're preaching? Go back to real biblical truth. And like, I was just literally just reading the Sermon of the Mount. And they're like, well, that may be Jesus, but it just doesn't work today. Like,
yeah.
And that's exactly what these guys are doing. They're being presented with literal Jesus. Being like, yeah, well, that doesn't work today. Like, it may be God, but it's not the God we need right now. So just piss off with that nonsense. And that is right there. Like, the inability to recognize God saying, hey, turn around. You got to turn around. Pivot. And just saying, no. And yes, that may well be the only time you'll ever catch me making a Friends joke. It may be the only one I know. Anyway.
Are we good?
We've got our last little chunk here. The true kindred of Jesus.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Then his mother and his brothers came, and standing outside, they sent to him and called him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, your mother and your brothers are outside asking for you. And he replied, who are my mother and my brothers? And looking at those who sat around him, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother. That's interesting.
It is.
Like the specific wording of it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Mary must have been just like,
fuck, Josh, come on. Now, this is, as all things, it's important, but it's also important in two different ways.
What? It's important, but it's also important.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I tried to give each version of important very different shadings there, but yeah. Like, first off, the core reading of family isn't necessarily blood, it's the people who actually support and care for you. Like, that's a valid reading of this. That's fair. Bit of a dick move for Jesus to do that while standing with his fucking family.
Doesn't his family support and care for him? Is there evidence that they didn't? Or
no, not really. Although it raises interesting theories and suppositions, because aside from the occasional one or two, we don't see a whole hell of a lot of Jesus's brothers and sisters throughout the text, and we still don't know what the hell happened to Joseph.
Yeah, he's not mentioned here. He just...
The historical assumption is that he died, which is not uncommon.
Yeah.
But with the reading of this text, I mean, you could, without affirmative proof or justification, you could theoretically take the read that half of Jesus' family wasn't necessarily affirming, did not support him, and kind of kicked his ass out. And Mary followed him around because she loved her son, but the rest of them kind of told him to piss off, although James and a couple others did go with him. Like, it is possible, although again, not affirmatively supported by the text, it is possible that Jesus had a partially non-supportive family, which would honestly be in keeping with Jesus having that human experience, partially supported, partially not. Gets a little bit of everything. Like, that would be in keeping.
There's something of the divine that so many of the experiences that Jesus had can be recast and to be related to by so many people in so many completely different ways.
Yeah. Like,
I think that might be one of the great things about the Bible is these moments where you're like, hey, mood. Like, the concept of being able to relate to the incarnation of our creator is pretty cool.
Chat we did get a question from the chat. So could it be that he said this in order to dissociate himself from them and to protect them? You know, the old superhero analogy. I would say less likely, because if that was his intent, he didn't do a great job about it. Especially because we're 2,000 plus years later and we still know the names of all his family members. And they're kind of big figures in a major planet stomping religion. So my assumption would be, since Jesus tended to be effective at everything he intended to do, probably not. But I guess it's a read you could take, I suppose. But
being effective at everything you attempt to do is not part of the human experience.
True. But large-scale things where he attempted to do a kindness or a good thing to people, he never failed to do it. So if he was trying to protect his family in that way, we'd never hear about them again. Like, that wouldn't really be a thing. So I tend to believe that's probably not what his intent was here. But as for what his actual intent was here, it's teaching, of course. He's teaching about the, you know, the whole blood is thicker than water argument. And I'm using that, by the way, in its actual tense, because the full quote that refers to is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. So it's saying found family is better than actual family. So when someone says blood is thicker than water and says, you got to go with your family over your friends, they're teaching you bullshit, even in the context of the original quote. Anyway, that's my literary self getting upset. So that's going, like, the main teaching of this here is that it's okay to distance yourself from family if you have to. Like, and some of us do. Like, whether or not that's what Jesus was doing with his actual family, that is the core of the teaching here, is that, and you have to sometimes. If they can't support you, if they can't support the godly work that you're doing, sometimes you have to walk away. And that, for the record, is a radical fucking teaching in the time where the only extant social structure was the family. Families were big, massive communal units of parents and grandparents and sisters and brothers and children and just so many slaves and women who were also slaves. Like, I'm not saying it was a good system. It was complicated and large, and all of your social needs were dependent on your role and position within that structure. So for Jesus to be able to say that walking away is okay is radical. It's disturbing in the context of the time, but